There's a lot to love about the upcoming PS3 and Vita action RPG Dragon's Crown, but one of the most intriguing aspects of the game is its emphasis on character classes. Dragon's Crown's 6 completely unique classes not only give it incredible replay value, but they also give the game a truly different feel depending on who you decide to play as. Cleverly, Dragon's Crown's character classes build in a sort of de facto difficulty system that hinges on who you play as. The classes aren't at all created equally. Some are outright easier to use and more forgiving in combat. Others demand a greater emphasis on character skill, and reward you more when you're successful. This video is designed to briefly explain the ins and outs of each class so you know what you're getting into. The Fighter is recommended for all players, and is one of the game's 2 hulking tank classes. The Fighter's S-ranked strength is rivaled only by the Dwarf, but statistically the Fighter gets further advantages due to his surprising speed, making him faster than the Dwarf. Unfortunately, the Fighter doesn't have much in the way of magic resistance or intelligence, but the latter is especially unimportant considering he won't be casting any spells. He'll be kicking some ass instead. In battle, the Fighter relies on brute force, using short and long swords alike to cleave and otherwise brutalize his enemies. Pressing circle allows him to smash his sword into the ground for an area of effect attack, but this forces him to lose his sword for a time, so it's smart to use it sparingly. Thankfully, when combined with his A-ranked constitution, the Fighter's heavy plate armor, gauntlets, and more keep him relatively safe. He even has special abilities that allow him to take the heat off of other, lesser character classes, making him a likely hero when the going really gets tough. The Dwarf is very similar to the Fighter statistically, but he's actually a bit stronger. With S-ranked strength and constitution, the Dwarf can deal high damage with melee strikes like the Fighter, but he can withstand even more damage too. He's a bit slower statistically, but it doesn't quite play out like that in battle. He can swing his hammers with a fair amount of dexterity and, like the Fighter, can smash them into the ground to cause area of effect damage. The difference between the Fighter and the Dwarf at this juncture is that he's not quite as defenseless without his weapons. His fists do a lot of damage too, and the Dwarf can even pick up and throw enemies across the screen. His belly flop attack is also quite interesting and allows him to harm multiple foes from above while staying out of danger. He's designed for normal players, but in reality he's pretty good for beginners too. In fact, his only real deficit compared to the Fighter is that he has even lower magic-based statistics. The Amazon is the 3rd and final melee-based character class, and she's by far the hardest of the 3 to use. RPG veterans might recognize her for being a bit of a berserker, a fierce and unpredictable physical attacker that actually gets stronger and faster the more she attacks an enemy. She, like the Dwarf, is designed for a player looking for normal difficulty, but she suffers from statistical deficits that leave her at a disadvantage, including C-ranked constitution that doesn't allow her to take a whole lot of damage. Her strength too is deficient compared to the Fighter and Dwarf. Still, when you get her into battle, you'll quickly find out that, when used properly, she's a force to be reckoned with. She too has the ability to circle attack and lose her weapon for a bit, but it's the fact that she feels a bit like a fighting game character that really gives her a unique feel. Still, don't be lulled into a false sense of confidence with the Amazon. If you're new to the game and want an accessible melee character, you'll probably want to go in another direction. The Elf acts as a sort of transition between the physical attackers and the magic missile-based attackers, because she can do a little bit of both. Her A-ranked dexterity makes her the quickest character class, and her ability to quickly change up her bow-based attacks with some melee strikes makes her not only extremely versatile, but balanced as well. Interestingly, she's designed for expert-level players, but I think she's a tad bit friendlier than that. The way you want to use the Elf is to keep a balance. At first, she'll have 10 arrows to her name, and those arrows can be replenished regularly, so you'll want to use them often. Shooting straight ahead or into the air both have their advantages, and both attacks can also be charged for extra oomph. If you run out of arrows in your quiver or simply want to change things up, she has an array of swift kicks that she can use for moderate damage. But with C-ranked constitution, you're not going to want to keep her in harm's way for long. And now we come to the magic users, starting with the Sorceress. The Sorceress is also designed for expert-level players, and she's actually statistically the weaker of the 2 magicians offensively. Her A-ranked intelligence matches up with her S-ranked magic resistance, however, which makes her the strongest character in the game against arcane attacks. The Sorceress also has another strange advantage that she actually shares with the other female classes. Her A-ranked luck means she's extremely likely to find rarer loot than her companions. Don't overlook this advantage when you play. In battle, the Sorceress will rely on wind and ice-based attacks, at least until you diversify her repertoire with more spellbooks. Her Tornado spell is especially useful on airborne enemies, while her Ice area of effect attack is a killer on smaller, lesser enemies. She'll go through her mana quickly, however, but it can always be replenished, either by using fairly frivolous melee attacks or, better yet, holding down the square button, which leaves her vulnerable but quickly gives her the power she needs. The final class, the Wizard, is very similar to the Sorceress, but is far more offensive-minded, with an S-ranked intelligence that makes him the strongest magic user in all of Dragon's Crown. He's weaker against magic attacks when compared to the Sorceress, but he's a tad stronger with melee attacks while suffering from the game's worst luck, meaning he's the least likely to find valuable and rare loot. This is something very important to keep in mind, since this fact alone makes him more difficult to use than the Sorceress, with a smaller likelihood of finding the equipment necessary to give you an edge in battle. Before you diversify the Wizard with new spellbooks and abilities, you'll find that he mostly relies on fire-based attacks, and he, like the Sorceress, will burn through his mana very quickly, pardon the pun. He can create a towering inferno on the screen that will scorch enemies around him, and his fire-based area of effect attack is outright devastating. He can also launch mana-eating fireballs from his staff if you want to stay out of danger, which you should, since he totes C-ranked Constitution only ranked slightly higher than that of the Sorceress. Dragon's Crown launches exclusively on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita in August. For more about the game between now and then, keep it tuned to IGN.